This Star Wars comic book right here, this is the Marvel Comics Super Special number 27. And this is the comic adaptation of Return of the Jedi. It's easily one of the most important comic books of my life when I was much younger. In this video, I'll discuss how this comic book kept Return of the Jedi fans content between 1983 and 1986. Seriously, we've got it so much easier these days when it comes to watching any sort of a Star Wars movie on demand whenever the mood strikes. Lucasfilm will put out a movie in December, right? Right at the end of the year, and then it's available for video on streaming or on Blu-ray, usually about 3 months later, right? Like if it's released in December, you can expect that you're going to have access to this movie by March, in most cases. Of course, if you're like me and you watch movies over and over again, then this is, of course, great news, but that is not how it used to work back in the 80s. So Return of the Jedi was released in May of 1983. I saw it in the movie theaters about 3 times, only because that was about as much as my parents could tolerate. So for my 9th birthday, the following fall, my mom and dad got me the Star Wars read-along book. It retold the movie in about 12 minutes, which made it enjoyable for about 12 minutes. But I needed something more than that. I needed something to sustain me, a little bit more movie accurate, if you will, because the movie would not be released to home video for about 3 years. The movie was released in the theaters in 1983, but it wouldn't come to video until 1986. Yeah, seriously, think about that for a minute. 1986. See, there's a lot of videos right now on YouTube expressing a whole lot of outrage against Lucasfilm for things like diversity and inclusion and stuff like that. But really, the real true outrage is the fact that they made us wait 3 years after Return of the Jedi came out to movie theaters before we could actually see it on home video. Where's the outrage for that? Speaking of 1986, where's the Lucasfilm outrage for Howard the Duck? That's another important thing, and I'll make sure I cover that in its own video. So it would be about a year after the movie came out to theaters that I would actually discover this comic book. Like I said, this is the Super Special number 27. It is the adaptation of the complete movie. It's actually a compilation of about 4 different comic books that were released that depict Return of the Jedi from start to finish. I was totally unaware of the 4 individual books back then, but I did find them on Amazon in the Kindle store, so you can still buy them digitally. This comic book is the movie. Like, I read it from cover to cover over and over again. If you wanted to get your Return of the Jedi fix like I did, this is probably the best way to do it because, like I said, you're waiting a long time before it was on home video. It's a very close representation of the movie, including the dialogue. I mean, there are definite differences in the dialogue, but it was close enough for me to notice when I finally got it on video cassette and played the movie for the first time in so many years. I was like, I already know what all these guys are going to say. It provided me also with insights that I don't think I would have had otherwise. That was the one thing that I do remember about this book. At the beginning of Return of the Jedi, Vader's shuttle arrives at the new Death Star, and he's greeted by Commander Drought. I don't think his name is uttered once in the film, but that's definitely his name, and you'll see as much in the credits at the end of the movie. But in the comic book, his name is referenced a couple of times, so I remember thinking I was armed with some pretty solid, deep knowledge about certain things in the movie that I probably would not have known otherwise. One of the things that I love about this comic book is the artwork. It has that unique comic style from the 80s. You know, I wasn't a big comic book kid. I had a few, but I wasn't a big collector. I can distinctly remember the somewhat imperfect nature of the art. I'm not sure how else to articulate it, but there are certain things about the artwork that just stand out as being acceptably imperfect, whether it's a depiction of the character's face that seems off, you know, while being okay at the same time, or sometimes just coloring that's noticeably inaccurate, like Luke's bright yellow hair in this frame. Like going through the pages of this comic book after not seeing it for decades, it reminds me of those imperfections, and I love it. Just as noteworthy are sort of the accurate depictions of key moments in the film. One standout group of frames comes at the point where Leia gets captured after she frees Han from the carbonite. The Gamorrean guard's hand on her shoulder, like you're seeing here, as he shoves her toward Jabba. It's movie accurate, along with her total disgust being close to Jabba, right? And C-3PO's reaction with his hand up like that. Like, I can remember reading this comic and being able to replay the voices and sounds in my head as I read along. And even the Huttese words that Jabba shouts when he drops someone into the Rancor pit is totally accurate, right? But the Rancor's face, on the other hand, like this reminds me of Sloth from Goonies. But that's what I mean about acceptably imperfect for 1980s comics. The Rancor looks like Sloth, and for some reason, I'm just totally okay with that. The accuracy does go a little bit off the rails towards the end of the book. During the final duel, where Vader and Luke are fighting, things are a bit abbreviated. Luke manages to hold his ground early on and send Vader tumbling down the stairs, just like the movie, powering down his lightsaber and saying he doesn't want to fight. Now in the movie, Vader's like, hey, whatever, dude, I'm going to kick your ass regardless, and Luke has to fire his blade back up super quick. Now in the comic, Vader goes right to reading Luke's thoughts and discovering Leia, and using that to tempt Luke into getting angry. Luke slices off Vader's hand in a much more spectacular fashion in the comic book, but they don't depict Luke's realization that he risks turning into Darth Vader himself, like looking at his mechanical hand after he lobs off Vader's hand. And then Vader's about to die. He asks Luke to remove his mask, right? We all know the scene. Luke does so, just like in the film, but they don't show us Vader's face for some reason. Does he have eyebrows? Does he not have eyebrows? We're never going to know by reading the book. So the real Star Wars drought for fans is between 1986 and 1999, when there was nothing new on screen for Star Wars, right? But the dark times, at least for me, or 8-year-old me, was between 1983 and 1986, when we didn't have anything to see that was new and we were waiting for Return of the Jedi to come to home video. That was the real drought for my youth. And this is the comic book that kept me going through those years. If you're interested in reading this yourself, you can do so digitally. I actually found them on Amazon, like I mentioned, and in the video description I have a link to the 4 individual comics that make up this compilation. They cost $1.99 each, they are inexpensive, and they are awesome. Thank you for joining me on this trip down memory lane. If you happen to be old like me, and you remember the Marvel Comics Super Special number 27, which I'm holding right here, or you remember any of the 4 comic books that made up this compilation, let me know by leaving a like on this video. And be sure to subscribe for more content. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.